So if you can't hire for skill set, hire for mindset and train people up.
We hire for the brain more than the skill, definitely. It's better to train people and they leave than don't train them and they stay.
Our first question is around the digital skills gap. That's probably our biggest question for today. I think that the BBC published a recent report saying that we're heading towards a catastrophic digital skills shortage. I guess some of us have been around for a while and we've heard that for a while. And there's been lots of different ways of us dealing with that over time. I think the pandemic has added a new layer onto that. And I think, while some people are probably saying, well, it's allowed me to broaden my net with remote workers, I don't know what it's doing in terms of our investment in our people. I'm not sure whether, we're investing at the grassroots level in STEM subject education and basically our apprenticeship programs and our graduate programs, which maybe needed more of a local physical presence in an office, so you could look over somebody's shoulder and help them. They might be impacted by the pandemic. So are we facing a catastrophic event here, or is it just more of the same as it has been over the last few years? Rennie, I wanted to come to you with that. I know you had some good thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you. So I think ThoughtWorks has been a fortunate business where we're a global consultancy. So we've been using tools, for remote collaboration for years and years. So the transition to fully remote through the pandemic globally was fairly easy for us in some ways. Obviously, we had to lead our clients on that journey, but I think more so from a in-house perspective. We do run graduate programs, and it's one of our biggest sources of recruitment for our business is hiring through the graduate scheme. We run our own ThoughtWorks University, and that is something where we had to spend time and invest time in figuring out how do we fully make that program remote. And it's meant the investment takes longer. Instead of having folks go 5 weeks and spend in an intensive learning environment, we've had to extend that to 7 weeks so that we incorporate breaks in and people don't have Zoom fatigue and all of the things. So I think it just requires a lot of innovative thinking. I don't think that you have to physically be present to learn. Definitely not the case, but you have to be innovative with the ways in which you adapt what you currently have in your business. And I think similarly with just digital skills in general, we know there's a talent shortage. Got a good statistic from a report by Forbes, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, this is a US number, but they always still are leading. They say that for every one job-seeking person, there's 3 jobs available in the US, engineers, sorry. So there are 1 million unfulfilled jobs. The reality is that you're going to have to grow your own. We were going back and talking about climate change earlier before we started the full call. Grow your own is a thing that you think about in your garden, but I think that businesses start to think about a little bit more about growing your own. How are you going to grow your own data skill sets? How are you going to grow your own cybersecurity skill sets? Because those are skill sets that are scarce in the marketplace, but also ones that you have to think about. So we also at ThoughtWorks have done a number of programs. We have our own data university. We have our own infrastructure academy. We have some security training, but not quite yet at the level that we need it to be. So we know it's something that we need to evolve.
All right. Okay. So I think we're saying there that graduate programs, apprenticeship programs, growing your own. I like that phrase, is still important. Maybe needs a bit of adjustment in the approach, but it's still fundamentally important. I love that stat. That stat's a harsh one. I'm in the middle of recruiting in America at the moment, and plenty of candidates turning up. I'm really quite enthusiastic, and then we sort of got to the end of a kind of 2-week process and got to the offer point, and suddenly was just getting gazumped everywhere by people coming and saying, well, I've got 3 other offers, so can you? And it was really quite sort of shocking that we had to do that. And fast coming to the opinion of like, okay, we might need to take a different approach to some of this and maybe get a few experienced people and a few less experienced. Rick, how are you finding that?
I think I'd echo a lot of the things that René's just said. There's a couple of really interesting points to pick up there, particularly around how you train people in a remote world. So we had our own academy. I would have said that I didn't agree that there's a catastrophic digital skills shortage. And I think that there isn't, because barriers to entry, and this is where I really do agree with Renee, barriers to entry are really down to the willingness of your organization to invest in your people. So if you can't hire for skill set, hire for mindset and train people up. So we've started, I think, broadening out the places that we look for people. We're working with a variety of different organizations, from sort of traditional recruiters through to charities that help look for roles for neurodiverse people, and then how do you bring them into your organization, and then that ripples out with, okay, now what extra training do we need for managers to cope with people who approach things differently. We run our own internal academy, though we did pause our grad scheme last year while we were trying to work out how you managed an intake. That was less about our ambition to take part in it and more about wanting to do right by the people you hire. And I don't think we would have done a good job in bringing people in then. But now I think, we're getting better at this. We're getting better at being in a world where we work remotely and people are more comfortable with it. And so we had already started moving towards a world where we did kind of on-demand training with our academy. So if we had a skill shortage inside, then we would find somebody inside who was good at that, and we'd help them learn to be a teacher, and then they would run courses for other people in the organization who wanted to run it. And so that really echoed a grow your own point, because I think that works. But ultimately, I think the final point I'll make on this is that our whole industry is continually advanced by innovation. And when you see something like a skills shortage in an area, you tend to quite quickly see productization spin up to commoditize whatever that is. And you see that now in a lot of the data, insight, and analytics tools are spinning up in areas where data scientists are hard to get hold of. So there might be a shortage now, but that doesn't mean there's a shortage forever. And it doesn't mean that we're in the middle of a crisis.
So I think, yeah, it's a lot of the stuff that Renee was saying there. We've Rob Crabtree, one of our attendees, has posted, how do you manage grow your own for scarce skill sets against market pressure that will steal them in a year's time? And he's saying especially relevant for subject matter experts. Yeah, I can think it's the same for every single, security guys, data engineers, all of those are very, very scarce skill sets, right? But Mohammed, have you had any experience of that? And in terms of would you still invest in people worrying that they might be nicked in a couple of years? Well, have I got you on mute again, Mohammed? That's twice, Mohammed. 3 times and you're out. That's how it works.
It's like a yellow card, right? After it's red.
Definitely a yellow card. Yellow card.
I'm really bad at this. Sorry, man.
Don't worry.
So I've been listening actually, and it's really interesting. So especially in the perspective of a small company like us that doesn't have a name, Renee, ThoughtWorks is such a global brand, and it's kind of you still can maintain the investment or the influx. But for us, we don't exist. Nobody knows us. So whilst we have a very cool technology approach and culture, you have to defend. You have to find a way to attract people. And to do that, it's kind of we accept, and we're perfectly comfortable that we're kind of a stepping stone. And that we've seen that where we hire for the brain more than the skill, definitely. On the premise that we've tried to design our organization or the way we do work in a really compelling and easy to understand way, because people don't like getting into a small company, especially if it suffers from complexity. But what we tend to see is we would hire, so we don't have a shortage really, because we try to spot the potential of people if they have a good brain. So for example, for our data science environment, we'll try to identify people who did math and try to find a career somewhere that might be interested in research, and we lean them into solving an industry problem through technology, but not really we don't tell them we're looking for software engineer. You're going to do software engineering, but really we want your brain. Do you have a good brain? Do you like this challenge? And we let them discover through the journey if actually they like software engineering or not. What tends to happen is they do a really good job at it, but after 2 or 3 years, then they have all the toolkit to go to ThoughtWorks or IBM but I think we're super relaxed about that. I mean, there's a quote that everybody overuses, which is it's better to train people and they leave than don't train them and they stay. And we completely comfortable with that approach. So for us, it's really hire for the brain. It's not about creating a graduate program. It's really looking at the person and trying to see can that person add something to the organization? That's been our approach, certainly, and it's been successful.
Yeah, no, I think, Rennie, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I agree, and I understand it. I'm enjoying the humor around the ThoughtWorks piece, and to be fair, we get poached as well, so it happens, right? It's just part of being in tech and being in a competitive talent marketplace. I mean, there's two things I want to touch on. One, I think for smaller businesses, because I do know that ThoughtWorks has a lot more capacity to be able to grow our own. We have partnered with some of the coding academies. I know we use Northern Coders, and I'm for the name of life of me remember the name of the ones we use in London, but we partner with companies, and we use scholarship models where we provide people scholarships, that deserving people of scholarships, to go to these academies, and then they go through our recruitment process off the back of it. It's not a shoe-in, but we trust the learnings that they have in those environments. So you can partner with other organizations and pull through to your own recruiting for that. So I just want to make that clear for people who may not have the capacity in-house to do your own training. And those career changers, is what we call them, have proven to be really successful, because to Rick and Mohammed's point, you're hiring for the brain, or you're hiring for that mindset, you're hiring the attitude and the aptitude, not necessarily the skill set. So it's just that's something to think about. And then the last thing would just be, on the in getting people to stay piece. Some of it's around, I mean, hopefully all of us have companies that are continuing to grow, and any part of company growth is new opportunities for people to step up. So I think it's you can't just invest in someone once and forget about them. You have to have a continued path and a journey for that individual. And that's down to, how do you support individuals in their career growth, and what's your company culture? And, you will still have a drop off, but I mean, I think we've been really successful at ThoughtWorks over the years to have a lower than industry average drop off because of our culture. So I think it's important to think about those aspects.
Yeah, no, I think the cultures are really important. Matt, does that play into any of your experience?
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, that's exactly what I was just going to start just talking about a little bit. I think, being much like having a medium-sized organization, certainly in the tech world, it's quite small, and it's okay to accept, people are going to come on board, and perhaps they're not going to stay with you forever. That's okay, but again, Renee's kind of already said it now. What your job families look like today, and what they're going to look like in 1, 2, 3, 4 years' time. Well, if the last year should have taught us anything, it's that that's not going to be the case. Career paths are going to develop and change over the next couple of years. People who come into one role may find they've got a skill in a different area. You give them exposure in your organization to what they're interested in. If they're working on what they're interested in, they're going to grow and develop and potentially feel, build that loyalty with you, build that employee experience. So they're going to hang around. And if they are going to move on again in years to come, then, build your pipeline in such a way that, you're reaching out now, plan looking into schools. Having spent a long time working in the civil service, I'm not going to start. I haven't learned to critique the government yet, so I'm not going to start. But we can't massively influence the government spending money on schools, but we can, as organisations and leaders in those organisations, look to reach out into universities and schools and A-level students, things like that, to talk about careers in tech. Tech isn't just someone sitting there at a keyboard doing this anymore. Tech is creative problem solving. That's what it is. It's just those creative problems keep changing. And to Rick's earlier point, I would agree that, it's not a catastrophe, it's just the pace has changed. And so the pace has changed. It looks like there's a big gap, but the market's going to evolve and tweak, and the gap will start being filled again. But that pace isn't going to stop. We solve a problem today, it'll just become a different problem tomorrow. So we need to look as leaders of our organizations of how we're going to set ourselves up so we don't keep falling into little chasms of where there's a gap. There's a gap in an area, we haven't identified it. That's probably on us more than on technology. The culture piece really, really, really matters. Organizations really should focus on it. And one more stat to finish off. A PwC report recently, it was kind of like 3% of female A-level students said their career in tech was their first choice, but there's like 64% of females study a STEM subject at school. What happens there? What is happening? Why is the tech world perceived in such a way? There are things we can do to address that. And I guess, the stuff that WeShape is doing, your blogs and the stuff you talked about at the beginning, that's good stuff. Talk about what tech really means. Don't let people feel like they're bottled. They're kind of going to be pigeonholed. You're going to come and work in this sector. That'll be your job for life. It won't be. Things are going to change.
Yeah, no, I like that. Rick, on the cultural point, you're bringing together some companies, right? Which brings lots of challenges. Are you finding that you've got lots of different cultures that you're having to bring together, and is that impacting people's desire to stay or go?
Oh, so I mean, one, I think we're in that weird period at the moment, right, where all attrition dropped off as people stayed safe. Why would you change jobs in the middle of a pandemic? So I think we're in a period where we'll see it start to spike back up again. Movement overall, I agree with everything I've heard. I'm sorry, we'll answer your question in a second, David. Movement overall, I think is a really positive thing. I think it stops people getting stale. I don't think jobs for life exist anymore. And I think there's actually more movement from large companies to small companies than people realize, because people are so confident that they can find another role if where they've moved to doesn't work out. So that safety of enterprise isn't a thing anymore. Culturally, though, yes, I am in a weird place. I'm trying to create an identity for a division. There's 2,000 people who work in technology in my division. How do you give them? What are the things that matter to them from a cultural perspective? Because people don't leave just for money. People leave for opportunity, they leave for learning, they leave for challenge, they stay for culture. So I'm not interested in creating a single culture for the whole organization. I think that's a bad idea. I think you need to have some values that underpin what your culture is. And then you need local accents, if you like, regional accents on what happens in each of your areas. So I have teams now out in Cluj, in Dublin, in Portugal, in Leeds, in Sheffield, and London. And it would be crazy to say that they all have to have the same culture, but they should all be based on the same values that make people want to join in the first place. And you should be able to understand what those values are when you work there, because that's what you'll stay for. You won't stay because, well, you might stay for a bonus, but really when you start to look at the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, the things that people really stay for matter much more about the people they work with, the work they do, and the environment they work in.
I mean, some really good stuff there. My big takeaway there is we're not facing into a catastrophe, right? This is it's different. Some of it is familiar to us as senior leaders. Hopefully that will give some of our attendees here today, a little bit of hope that, keep going, keep looking at all of the different things that attract talent, make talent stay. Keep investing in them. I love the grow your own. I think that's something that we can do. But